Thank you, Nelima.
Quanita, maybe I'll just begin by welcoming you on behalf of the Truth and Reconciliation Week. And thank you so much for showing up. I think this is your third session with us for Truth and Reconciliation. So you've been there with us from the beginning, and just who you are and the work you do is so important to this platform. So I just want to thank you again on behalf of all the conveners of Truth and Reconciliation.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. You know, when I saw it, it's like, okay, yes, I have to do that. I don't know what I'm doing, but and so then I, think, okay, so what? And so it makes sense to be here today and to have it in alignment with a book that I co-wrote with Amy Howton, The InnerGround Railroad. The InnerGround Railroad, currently we've just found a distribution place. So we're on back order. We sold out our first batch that we brought in. And so once we get distribution set up, they'll be available again here. So we did just land on a company to do distribution. And so now it's just about getting another batch printed and ready to go. So that'll be available soon. And before we leave, I'll put in the chat where you can sign up to get notification that the book is available again. So again, my name is Quanita, and I'm so grateful to be here and to be with you all. Some of what the plan is for us to look at how this legacy of slavery affects each of us. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that we have is that the slave archetype is only carried by the person that we look at as obviously enslaved. But the slave archetype, like any archetype, has a light and a shadow. And archetypes are just patterns that show up over and over again on the planet. And I love what Clarissa Pinkola Estes has said about archetypes. And what she says is what happens when an archetype shows up is that we become a medium for that pattern in the world. And so it starts being channeled through us. And so the slave archetype, the way that I hold it is that the shadow side of the slave archetype is being a slave to a person, a thing, or even an idea. But the light side of the slave archetype is being a slave to the divine spirit within. It actually teaches us self-mastery. It's how we find our freedom. And, and so we're going to play with the archetype a bit today for ourselves. And in a check-in kind of way, what I would like to do is just start with, if you'd share your name, share where you're at, and why it was important for you to come to this call today. And I'll just offer up, I use this stone today as a talking piece. And so I'm going to offer up the stone as a talking piece. And so when you get ready to speak, you can just say, I'm going to pick up the piece. And then when you're done, you can just let us know you're complete. Anybody can go.
Well, I'll go. I'm Charlotte Nichols. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I learned about you, Quanita, through a friend who loaned me your book. And I was absolutely fascinated by it. I've been doing racial justice and reconciliation work in one form or another for most of my adult life. But currently, my focus is within the Episcopal Church and specifically within Trinity Cathedral in Cleveland. And what I love about your book is the connection between the inner work that we need to do and the work that we need to do out there in the world around us. And I was particularly taken with all the emphasis on the ancestors because I am descended from people in Virginia who were slaveholders. And I've been aware of that heritage for quite some time and just kind of struggled with what to do about it and how to incorporate that into my what I do now. And I loved, there was something in your book about when an ancestor did bad things in their life, in their life on earth, we can go to them and say, okay, you got to help me. You got to help me turn this around. And I have just gone back to that time and time and time again. I found it so helpful. So that in a nutshell, that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
And I can put down the talking piece and somebody else can take it up.
Maybe I'll pick it up. I'm Nilima Bhatt. I'm the co-convener of this Truth and Reconciliation Work platform, this movement. I know Quanita since 2014, 15, something like that. I've always been so struck by her being the real deal, you know, when it comes to this work. She's so genuine, and she does such genuine work that gets such genuine results. So I'm always here when she has something to offer. And I just realized maybe why I showed up on this call when I also have other TRW sessions that are expecting me to join them, is what Charlotte just said. You know, maybe Quanita, you can speak to this thing of, if there is an ancestor who has left unfinished business and that we are having to bear the consequences of that, can we actually go back and call on them? And how do you do that? I would love to know. Thank you. And with that, I hand it back.
All right, I can pick up the talking piece. My name is Rachel Zargo, and my feet are in Austin, Texas right now. And I'm here because it's really coming up for me that while I've done supportive work for a long time, I feel called to start using my voice more. And so, Quanita, I'm new to your work and sort of overcome by gratitude. As I was just watching your video before this. This is the first time Andy Swindler here shared your work with me. And I had to pull myself away from the video to pull over here. And I have a feeling I'll have a similar feeling walking away. So thank you. And I'll put down the talking piece.
I can take up the talking piece. I just felt there's always been a kind of a very strong intensity to your work. And I don't know much about your work. I'm going by, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm on the phone, I don't have my computer with me. And it's something about the work, I think, with ancestors and with slaves that drove me, because I see that kind of pattern, and I realize in myself, I've been both many, many times. More the slave than the perpetuator or the person who is, and I see that coming into my life, things that I do, I feel shades of it coming into, because sometimes I can be very harsh. I can be very, so I feel it's the other side of the coin showing up for me. And what you said was very interesting, how if you take it onto the positive, not the shadow side, but the other side, I feel we have a lot of that in India. It's the whole thing about spirituality, that almost to the point of one-pointedness. There is a thread somewhere there, because when you pointed that out, it made me think there's something there. I have not observed it before, but when you said that, there seems to be that one pointedness, that where we could just drop everything. You know, you can go barefooted. You could just do anything to. I'm not sure what I'm hoping it'll clear up as we go along, but that's the first glimpse I caught of it today, and that it was a very interesting observation for me. Thank you. I hand back the stone.
Well, I will pick up the stone. Thank you so much. I'm Rebecca Saltman. I'm in Denver, Colorado, and I have the good and incredible gratitude to know Quanita through Shakti Leadership in Nalima. And I am such a girl fan. It's 6:15 here in Denver, Colorado, a.m. And I have a session this morning as well, but I really was really just called. During the pandemic, Quanita's work around grief was mesmerizing to me. And we've been in touch a little bit around that. And it's magnetizing and important. And for that, I am tremendously appreciative and grateful for you, Quanita. And thank you so much for your work. And that's my story. I'm putting the stone back.
Thank you.
I'll check in. So good to see you. I have so many reasons to be here. I am Andy Swindler. I'm in Chicago, original land of the Three Fires Council. And I don't remember who I met first. I probably met Nalima first through Shakti Leadership and Conscious Capitalism. And I've been involved with Quanita and Fire and Water. And I actually do have the book right here. So I wanted to like feel the energy of that. But I haven't read it yet. So I thought, oh, this is wonderful to come into a session and be in space about it. Just adding on to what's said, I mean, I'm pretty much constantly interrogating my role, I guess, as a white man and how I came to be here. And I'm still pretty early on the journey, I'd say, of reconciling my ancestors and even learning about them. So that's a big piece of it. And I just went for a brief walk just in the lawn here, and there's tiger lilies on this property. And tiger lilies remind me, I'm actually grieving them because they only bloom for a few weeks. And that's a wonderful thing. It makes me appreciate them because I don't think anything's meant to last forever. So good to see you.
Thank you all. Why it was important for me to be here. I think it's because what it means, I believe what it means to be connected is that when we take on our own work, and this to me, the InnerGround Railroad, has been my own work. You know, one of the things that the book does is it shares our stories, Amy's and my stories, of our own healing. And we use the Dagra medicine wheel from West Africa and Burkina Faso to the different elements to share our stories. And so we go through our fire story, our water, our nature, our mineral, and our earth. And this book, I say, was writing me for about 15 years before it was launched out or has been launched out in the world. And I was writing it by myself, and at one point lost the book. I was about 17,000 words in, and my computer crashed. And we had a robo drive in the house that was backing up all the computers on 2 different hard drives. But we found out it was backing up all the computers except for mine. And so the book was gone. And I cried for a long time and belly ached about it. Every time I think about starting again. And then a friend asked me, he said, so what age does this book want to be written at? And I said, what do you mean? Because I had no idea what he was asking me. And he says, okay, look at some of those books on the shelf. He says, some of them, are written from young adults. Some of them are written from adolescents. Some of them are written from elder. What age does this book want to be written from? And I said, it wants to be an elder book. And he says, okay, so what age have you been writing from? And I laughed and I said, probably adolescent. And I realized that that's some of the promise, I think, of the divine, that when we're willing to show up and do our own personal work, that our old stories are completely taken away and replaced by new ones. And it wasn't that it didn't want the stories, it just wanted them to be written from a wisdom place instead of from a warrior place. From that, my own healing and excavation and on the ground kind of being in the mess. It wanted to be written from up here looking down at what the experience had gifted me with. And so then about 12 years in, I met Amy, who actually is offering another session. So you can look for her, Amy Howton. And when I first met her, I just knew we needed to be connected and invited her into Fire and Water, actually as an apprentice, not knowing, it was our first Fire and Water year, not knowing what that meant. She asked me, what does it mean? I said, I don't know, we'll figure it out. And then she heard I was doing this book and she asked if she could read it. And I sent her the first 25 pages. And I want to just share with you, because this is how it works, just a little bit of the beginning, what I sent to her, and then what she sent back to me. I wrote, first a quote by Bea Richards, who's an actress, which is, I think that we were the only family that I remember that called themselves Black. Everybody else was colored, and most people were Negroes, but we were Black, and I thank them. Oh, how I thank them for that. I'm so grateful. I'm not afraid of the dark. Bea Richards. And I write, I'm a dark-skinned Black woman who is a dark-skinned Black girl born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, the side of the river that represents freedom for so many, but not for me. The Ohio River for slaves was the finish line because crossing it meant freedom. The deep brown tones in my skin reveal the stories of my 89% African heritage. It holds the secrets of the field slaves and hides the 11% European slave owner heritage that is buried deep inside. I don't assume that all of my 11% European ancestry wants to keep me enslaved any more than I assume that all of my 89% African ancestry wants me to be free. It's a complicated relationship, as with most human stories. And her response to my 25 pages was, she sent to me, and this is a piece that she had written in a blog post before we met. I'm a white woman who lives on the Kentucky side of the Ohio River, the river that promises freedom to slaves, the river that traced the Underground Railroad. My life has straddled this river through childhood, education, marriage, motherhood, and work. This river, muddy and toxic and persistent, represents my seduction by empty promises of finally securing power and freedom somewhere out there in the world. It has taken my lifetime to understand that freedom is not given, nor can it be taken away. As a white woman who grew up in the South, this revelation has been a hard one coming. It has threatened all the lies and myths passed down. Tasting this revelation opens up a whole new way of understanding the world and my place in it. There's no going back. And the thing is that, we talked about how we were in relationship in her writing, which was blog post in my book, before we even met each other, because that's not the only passage that was that way. And so when I read that, I got, oh, you're supposed to write this book with me. And so as a Black woman on the Ohio side of the river, which represented freedom, and her as a white woman on the Kentucky side of the river, which was still an enslaved state, we write this book not about reconciliation between us, but within both of us and how it showed up differently. And so for me, not everyone has the same slave story as here in the US, but like I said, I think we all carry that legacy, because it does help to teach us our own freedom, or to have us discover our own freedom. Now, I love the question that you asked about the ancestors and unfinished business. You know, one of the scenes that I love in Lord of the Rings, it's the second movie where the promise is, if the king goes with his sword, the real king, and asks the ghost soldiers to come and help them in the battle, that they have to come, you know, that they don't have a choice. And that by coming and helping, they actually earn their own freedom, which I so love, because that's how I view with the ancestors. It's because our freedom is connected to theirs and theirs is connected to ours. And so they want to help because it's part of how they get free. And I think sometimes we have this idea that, especially the ancestors who were like the meanest and like the kind of hardest to get along with, we don't want to call them in. And I actually think they can help us even more, because they know what it was like to not be so-and-so, or not be whatever that thing was, because they have a different understanding when they're no longer earthbound than when they're here. And so, you know, that's why, yes, you can go ahead.
This is, you know, it's very real for me right now. So I need to ask,
Yeah.
could it be that the ancestor who is stuck, therefore sets up situations in your life where you are now forced to go back and connect with him and help, you know, ask for that help? You know, could they be actually putting up the barriers in your life because they are stuck?
I think it's actually that we are them. It's not, you know, it's not even, it's like some of that wound comes through us and it becomes ours too. So yes, it's theirs and ours, because we have wounds that are personal and that are part of the lineage. So like one of the things that we're going to do here in a minute, I'm going to put you in small groups to discuss, you know, to share an ancestral story. And then what we can do by these stories of our ancestors, we can look and see what were some of the gifts and some of the wounds that we inherited from that lineage. You know, and we carry different ones. Like I'm sure, you know, even though I have my children carry the same lineage, my children are descendants of slaves and descendants of the sons and daughters of the American Revolution. And so, you know, them carrying all of that lineage in them, they have different parts of them that want to be healed through them. Because the way that the wounds work is they travel down through the line until somebody heals them. You know? And any of us can choose to heal them, but if not, then they get passed to our children. And it's how we evolve, not just on an individual level, but also on a family level too. And then also on a national level, and then on a global level, is that connectivity. Yeah. So. All right, well, let's share some stories with each other. I'm going to put you all in breakout groups together. And what I would like you to do is to, let's see, let's do it this way. To go around and share a story, and it's an ancestral story, just a memory or something that you have about an ancestor. And then what I want you to do after you share the story, do the round with each other. And then I'll give you a warning when there's like 5 minutes left. I want you to go around and share what's some of the gifts, if you can, in that story that you can pull out, and maybe some of the challenges or wounds in that story. All right. Okay, you're gonna have, let's see, there's 3 people in each group. You're gonna have 20 minutes together. Enjoy. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So what are some of the gifts and wounds that came up? Let's share with some of the larger group.
I can start reflecting on what was said in our group.
Mhm.
I thought it was really interesting that secrets and shame and keeping things hidden was a tactic that was needed for security in some cases,
Mhm.
and was sort of overwhelmed by the idea that now we all seem to be in, I don't know, it seems to be a space and time, at least right here in the Zoom, where we can talk about all of this and really what a gift that is.
Yeah. One of the things that I hold in my work is shame, blame, and guilt aren't emotions. They're actually where we go to hide from emotions. You know, one of my teachers, Fan Shan Shur, she would say, you know, often the emotion we're hiding from is grief, deep grief and sadness, and that we've misunderstood shame, blame, and guilt as taking responsibility. And they're actually two very different things. We actually usually go to shame, blame, and guilt to avoid taking responsibility, because responsibility itself is just the ability to respond. And so when I hear in a room shame, blame, or guilt come up, I often will just ask, what are you trying not to feel? Because that's usually where we go when we don't want to feel what's present. Yeah. Anything else come up?
I'll offer something, and then I actually did to check out because I have a meeting. No, it was a really beautiful, kind of magical experience. Yeah, for me, it was about forgiveness. For me, it was something about an ancestor that felt interrupted, like something didn't complete while she was with us. And I might have some work to do to forgive myself for that. So I will keep that in my heart. Otherwise, it's been a lovely session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, Andy. One activity that when my mother-in-law died, actually, I had a shaman friend teacher of mine who was staying at my home to tend to my family as we were being with my mother-in-law as she was dying, and my children were really young. And one of the ways that she used to explain the soul or the spirit to my son is a glass of water. She set a glass of water on the table and let him be with it as the water evaporated through the days, and said, the body is like the glass and your spirit within is like the water. It evaporates. It looks like it's gone, but it really isn't. Like the ancestors, we can still be in relationship with them even after they've left the earth plane. The relationship shifts and changes, but we can continue. And one of the things too that I've been taught is that the ancestors can't interfere on your behalf unless they're invited. That's why, like in the movie, they had to go ask them to come, right? And so when we do invocations, when we're praying, when we're asking them, that gives them permission to come in, because we don't even have to be a slave to them, right? And I was thinking while you were all gone into your breakout rooms that part of what I hold in the work around this healing, this wound of slavery is, you know, we're all swimming in this water of what I always say, that's what's right, real, and true is white and male because of colonization. And we don't even know we're swimming in it. We don't even know that that's the water. And the problem with that is that water often takes the divine or spirit and nature out of the equation. And so then we think we're solely responsible for our own successes or failures. Instead of, and we start to live into this myth of independence. We say that we're all dependent. We're walking on the same earth, we're breathing the same air, we're drinking the same water. Then the question becomes, if we're always all dependent, then I think it's when we're in fear or lack, it's codependence. When we're in love and abundance, it's interdependence. And so it's just a matter of which dependence you're in. And that can switch within the middle of a sentence, I think. Like as we're going through the day, at moments, I think I'm very much in the interdependence, and it can slip, and I can be in the codependence in a moment too. And that's some of the healing of noticing those places where I'm still in that codependence, where I'm still expecting to be other referred instead of self-referred in my being.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah. So I think the place that was most obvious for me was when my mother died. So I was my mother's only child. She was 15 when I was born. And so we were very enmeshed. And I actually don't know if you can be a fully self-actualized adult when your same-sex parent is still on the earth plane. Because I think there's something about how we identify ourselves in relationship to that parent. They're the good one, so we're the good one. They're the bad one, so we're the good one. They're the bad one, so we're the bad one. But it's still all circled around them. Sabungfu Somé from West Africa and Burkina Faso, one of the things she had said before she died that I heard her say is that our mothers are our heartbeats to the world. And so this piece about when my mother died, it was like losing my heartbeat. You have to find a new heartbeat. Who am I if I'm not my mother's child here? And so this piece, so I was really other referred because it was all about her. It wasn't about me. And that didn't mean that I hadn't done some of my own healing work. I've been on my own healing journey since I was 16. It just meant that it was still so meshed with her and my story with my mom. And so we get the opportunity to, then, like I said, I don't know if it's true, if it's possible. I don't know if I've seen it yet. Someone who has become a fully actualized adult with their same-sex parent here. I think, that initiation when that parent transit. Yep.
Quanita, if you haven't let go your parent by something that is unforgiven and unfinished, that even after they've gone, doesn't mean you're going to individuate.
Oh no, not at all. It doesn't automatically happen when they leave. But I don't even know if it's possible before they leave, is what I'm saying. It's
Maybe
not
it
a
takes
given.
a lot of work, maybe a lot of self-awareness and self-aware people who are going to put in the work and do that separation energetically. And it takes a lot, but it's with intention, I would imagine. Why would it not be possible? If we can work ourselves towards enlightenment, why would we not be able to do this work as well?
Well, even the most enlightened of us, I think when we go home to our parents, we change. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if it's possible. I haven't witnessed it yet. And so, I don't know.
I can really, really, really connect with that, Quanita. It feels like, well, I was sharing in the group that, the real sense of connection with my ancestors began when my father died, and my mother died about 18 months later. And I discovered a whole wealth of genealogical information for both sides of the family in a file drawer of his. And this had been given to them by family members. They never talked about it, but thank God they didn't throw this stuff out, because after my mother died, I began to really look into that ancestry and began to work with it. and began to uncover some of the secrets that had been hidden. And, I literally couldn't have done it while my parents were alive. I literally couldn't have. And yes, much of my life has just been my journey with, I didn't have a particularly great relationship with my mother, with trying to untangle that and let go of it.
I also think that, part of the culture too of the what's right, real, and true has done is we do so much imitation instead of integration of the healing in our culture. And so it can look like we have done the work, and it can really just be the imitation of the work. And so much of it is how we do our education, because we start with the doing, and then we ask you to fit into that instead of the opposite. Instead of doing it, instead of living it, learning it, and then putting language around what you've already learned and have integrated. I also think that's why I think it's such a gift to have more than one elder that we have in our lives that we learn from, because it helps us to integrate the pieces that are for us and that are in alignment with, who we're becoming, instead of imitating what they're doing. And I think I think one of the reasons the imitation is so seductive is because we don't want to surrender. We think surrender because of the story of independence. Surrender gets scary for people. Yeah. So I think part of what the call for us each is, when we really get that that's the water we're swimming in, and then that's the yardstick we use to measure everything by. Because if we're not using that yardstick of what's right, real, and true, even who we view as privileged isn't. I always say it's not privileged to be disconnected from your heart. And so, even what we view as being successful isn't. Even what we view as being wealthy isn't. And if you change the yardstick that you're measuring everything by. And so we each have to find our own yardstick. And that's the healing. And so what we keep doing in this, I think, movement around the healing movement is actually we keep recreating different iterations of the same thing. That's why we haven't moved the dial a whole bunch. Matter of fact, it feels like we go backwards, because trauma actually wants to be healed. So it keeps floating to the surface until it's healed. And I always say the proof is in the pudding. So if what we're getting out isn't what we think we're doing, then there's, it's like, how do we carry the thread through to say, okay, if this is the output, if the output is fear, then what we're putting in is fear. If the output is love and community and relational, then that's what we're putting in. But we often think that we can, because we want it to be love, just because you want it doesn't, wanting it isn't enough. We have to be willing to do what's required. And that's not always easy. There's a cost to the journey. There's a cost to being warriors. And I actually love the warrior archetype in this work around healing the legacy of slavery, because I think that warriors understand three key things for this journey. One is that there's a cost to the journey, that you can't get something new without giving up something. 2 is warriors have a deep love and respect for the person on the other side. They know that they care about their cause just as much as you care about yours. And 3, warriors are willing to go into the mud and the dirt with you. But most of us confuse warriors with soldiering, and those are very different archetypes.
What was the second one, Quanita?
That they know that the other person cares. They have they know that the other person cares about their cause just as much as they do theirs. So they have a love for the other person. And so often in conversations, like when I'm doing conversations around race, I actually try to keep people from being in dialogue. And the reason why is I think we go in too quickly. I think we've been having the wrong conversations, especially I'll use race here as an example around race, because we're having conversations as if people aren't talking about it, but that's not true. People are always talking about it. The issue is most of us aren't mature enough to be in the conversation. Most of us aren't warriors. And so what I see my job in those spaces is doing is growing our capacity, so growing warriors, instead of sending you into war. The discussions, when we're doing the dialogues, we often go even unconsciously into the warrior archetype. But again, if you're not trained to be a warrior, it's messy. And so we can have a warm, fuzzy experience in a moment, but it doesn't change a whole hell of a lot. And so one example.
Can you explain a little difference between the cost and the willingness to be messy? Isn't that sometimes the same thing?
Well, I don't think so. I think the cost is, what do you have to give up? The messy is willing to be naked in front of each other, willing to say, like, to be vulnerable and to show up and to be in your own wound space and not be perfect, not try to be, not try to be so put together.
So and I'm thinking of a particular situation where perhaps they are the same thing, where the person does not want to engage their warrior archetype.
Yeah.
And is therefore in this victim place, and then, whereas what's being asked, so the cost is going to be giving up your peacemaker role and, this peace-loving, kind of person identification.
Yeah.
And go out there and get messy, that's the cost of getting to real peace and real respect with the other instead of avoiding the conflict. So the cost is, in this person's case, in this particular case, it feels as if the price they have to pay is wanting peace at all cost. And, that's the price they'll pay, and therefore they'll have to do the messy business of getting into the muck and, getting vulnerable with the other and getting into messy feelings and, which they want to avoid, actually.
I would say those are two different steps. I would say it's the cost for becoming a warrior for them. It's not that's not the cost for being in the war. That's the cost. The cost for becoming a warrior is you have to give up your own, your own fear of conflict, your own wanting to be liked, your own, that's the cost for you becoming a warrior. And then when you get in, there's a cost to get whatever it is the two of you want to get to together. But there's an individual piece first.
Yeah.
Before it's the collective.
I just wanted to add here, I think sometimes add to what Quanita said, what you said, Nirima, is sometimes the cost is giving up wanting peace at all cost. I mean, the messiness is that there will be a period when there is no peace, where everybody will be arguing, fighting, and that is the cost you have to give. Because I have been going through something like that, and it's to come to terms with that it's not always going to be smooth. That's the cost I have to give up, of always wanting this quietness, perfection, peace. To get to that, that's the messiness I will have to go through. So that is the cost I will have to give up, is that I may get to that, hopefully, but the anger, the thing, blame, shame, whatever, those things that you say, I will have to go through that to get to that. And that is the cost I will have to pay. And a lot of times for me, it's not easy to do that. So I will always go till a point and I will back away, because I am not, that is the one which is difficult for me to go through, the acrimoniousness. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
It's a number 9 thing, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel, part of the, with the Dagger medicine wheel, the element that I'm birthed into is water. And so water is about bridge making, peacemaking, forgiveness and reconciliation. It's about the emotions. And so often children who are born in years that are considered water years, which are birth years that end in a 1 and a 6, are very weepy when they're younger. They carry the water. And so they tend to, the conflict often tends to be encounter to the medicine they're bringing, or they think it is, until they mature their water and learn that you have to have sometimes to get the peace, there has to be some conflict first to go through to resolve things. And so I've had to learn that as I've gotten older, how to be in that. When I was younger, I didn't attend the last day of anything because I couldn't stand the just grief and leaving. And, I just had that until I've had, again, how do I carry the water? How do I carry the grief even? And some of the cost to the journey is that as you grow and, as I've grown and healed, I often will say that I grow in my level of understanding why things are the way they are, or why someone is where they are. And I lessen in my tolerance to be in the mess with them. And so all mess I don't have to be in. You can stay and you have the right to stay in your messiness as much as you want. And I don't have to choose to be in that with you. And so it's knowing that I have choice, right? So that we don't become victims of anybody or anything, that slave archetype that we talked about. So we're not abandoning ourselves in the process. And mainly it's because we can't give what we don't have. And so if you don't have a level of love and compassion and care for yourself, you can't have it from me. We have this thing of love thy neighbor as thyself. The problem with that is most people don't love themselves. So these stories that you shared, these ancestor stories, one of the things I love about the gifts and the wounds is that oftentimes the challenges or wounds that we have are often strengths overdone. We get in situations and they, at one point they're a strength. And if you start to do them too much and you rely on them too much, then they become weaknesses. And so what we can do is oftentimes they have medicine for us, right? They show up and they have usually the essence of it. If there's something that you show up, the quality of it, if you can boil it down to its bare essence, it usually has some good medicine for you. And it can help, looking at things, oftentimes what the trauma does is it flips reality. So in the slave owner and the slave looks like they're the slave owner looks like they're not as much enslaved. But actually, I think it's the opposite. How enslaved do you have to be to enslave another person? But because we don't see it, even more so, it's harder to heal when you don't even know that you're enslaved. And so even that, shifts. It's a switch, you know? The trauma often will change how, like, what felt bad in the trauma can, at best, become neutral. At worst, it can feel good, you know? And what's good, at best, can be neutral. At worst, can feel bad. We can be afraid of, like, when the good stuff comes up, because your nervous system gets all agitated, doesn't know how to act in it. And so having to retrain and rewire those pieces in ourselves. So I want to give you all another opportunity to be in conversation with each other and to talk this time, and with thinking of the wounds and the gifts and maybe even your own. What are some of the things that that you feel enslaved by in your life, person, thing, or even an idea? And what's one of the new stories you want to choose with that thing, idea, or person? Let's see. What do I do? I'm actually going to. I'm going to mix you up again, so you get to be with other people. Okay, and let's take, I'm going to give you 20 minutes again. I want you to talk about what are some of the things that you feel, and you may just take a round of just doing that. What are some of the things that you feel enslaved by? And it can be as silly and, you know, little as, you know, ice cream, and as serious as, you know, this, for me, knowing that there's a piece of my mother's legacy that I don't want to continue to walk, right? And so, but this, what I think loyalty requires of me, even in unconscious ways, right? And so it can be stuff like that. It can be anything in between, whatever, wherever you feel comfortable sharing. Okay. See you in 20.
I just told Quanita I accidentally bounced myself out excitedly trying to say something.
So what did you notice there? What came up? Let's share some with the larger group.
I think there was a lot of playfulness with the ability to articulate what slavery we're letting go of. There was just a lot of joyful, freedom energy that entered the room.
Nice.
What came to me as we were talking is there's real power in acknowledging how we're enslaved, and real power, particularly for being able to connect with other people. Because when we can connect from an awareness of, yeah, we're all somehow enslaved, and how, then, I don't know, it seems to break down a lot of barriers.
Yeah. And one of the ways that I think that we block ourselves from our own freedom is one, by trying to tend to everybody outside of ourselves. You know, the world's going to hell, so we need to like fight this or fight that or fight instead of realizing if we're all connected, the biggest movement I can make in healing the world is doing my own personal healing work. You know, because what happens is growth is it transcends and includes. So growth happens on an egocentric level, the personal or the body, an ethnocentric level, the communal or the mind, and a world-centric level, the spirit or the global, right? And what we often want to do is to do healing like on this ethnocentric layer of organization or of race or you know, like a group of people or family when we haven't tended to our personal. And so what'll happen is you can make movement. We can change behavior pretty easily for a short period of time. But because trauma wants to be healed, you can do that. You know, that's one of the things I think sometimes we miss in systems change stuff is we'll sit and we'll change behavior in a group level in a system, and we think we've healed it or fixed it. But because trauma wants to be healed, if you don't tend to the underlying issues, trauma will always float to the top and disrupt it. That's what we saw here in the States. So lots of things were shifted with Obama in office, but it was just the behavior. We weren't healing the wound that made that behavior that in the first place. And
the wound came back with a vengeance.
of course, because if you don't do it when it's small, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until you pay attention, until you're uncomfortable enough that you say, yes, we're going to heal this. You know, someone asked me the last election, presidential election, if I thought Trump was going to win. And I said, if that's what we insist on, you know, if we need it, that's what happens. The world is out to gift you, not to get you. And so it sends you exactly what you need. It's like the universe is just exact. It sends you exactly what you need for your own evolution, because we don't get to choose whether we evolve or not. We just get to choose in some ways how we do it. You can do it kicking and screaming, or you can do it in surrender. And what I love about these, you know, when we speak some of the things that we want to free ourselves from, one of the things, and maybe it's not fair to tell you after you've spoken them, but that what happens is the universe will start sending you opportunities to step into your own healing around that. So I often will tell organizations, I can always tell when an organization will struggle. And it's because depending on whatever their mission is what they'll struggle with. If you're an organization that's mission is around equity, you'll struggle with equity in your organization. And the reason, and we often think that means something's wrong instead of no, that's actually something very right, because what it's trying to do is you can't give what you don't have. So it's trying to build the muscle internally so that you have it then to offer externally. And so when it comes, if we don't treat it like, oh, it's bad and we want to shove it down into the closet, right, and not tend to it, we treat it as a gift. And okay, so this is giving us an opportunity to practice what we say we want out in the world. So then we're more prepared to offer it.
Yeah. So interesting, because when I was working with the Shoah Foundation with Holocaust survivors, that same issue came up, because when you're working with Holocaust survivors, perpetrators and victims show up, right?
Yes.
And oh my goodness.
Yes.
That is real.
Yeah. Yeah. And so know that opportunities will show up for you for those things that enslave you. And part of the thing that I would recommend is there's an opportunity to look at what are the belief systems that you're holding around those things. You know, what belief systems keep it in place? For an example, I have a friend, Shanae Swartz, who she works in narrative therapy. And one of the things she has said is, you know, the story even of anorexia can exist in parts of the continent of Africa because there's no belief that thin is better. So even what we take as an illness that is there, it can't even exist on that continent because there's no belief that thin is better. And so all these things that we've taken to be true, you know, what we often do is our experiences that we have are like all the stars in the sky. And we grab a handful of them and build a constellation around it and build a story. But the thing is, all those other stars are there too. And so if you choose a new story that you want, there's still stars that will validate that new story, experiences that you've had that can validate that new story too. And so paying attention to the stories that we've chosen and how they're in service or not in service to us. I was asking a question of someone the other day about where is it that you're claiming your culture, or you're claiming your wound as culture? You know, that, oh, that's just the way, you know, that's just the way we are, right? Where is it that you claim your wound as your culture and that you'll fight for it? Where do we fight for our own captivity? We're talking, actually it was with our fire and water group, and it was a conversation again where we weren't doing the dialogue around race. We were having a conversation about what does it mean? How does it impact you as a leader? You know, what are the things that you need to tend to around this? And one person said, you know, well, just because I shift doesn't mean that the culture shifts. My, you know, company's still my company. It doesn't really change a whole bunch if I shift. I was like, well, it does if you matter, right? Because you're in it. And when we shift and because we're connected, it does change everything. And she was just like, no, it doesn't. And she's like, you know, because there's still these systemic pieces. And I said, we're part of the system. The system isn't this thing outside of us. It is us. And Tennyson asked, and so Q, he says, why won't you let this go? Why is it like, you know? And I said, it's actually because it's how we argue for our own captivity. It's those pieces that we will fight for our own captivity. Like, because we've taken, because we believe what's right, real, and true is white and male. And those stories, there's not enough time, there's not enough money, there's not enough. It doesn't, you don't matter. You know, in some ways you don't matter, but you're all responsible, right? Isn't that kind of interesting? And let's challenge some of those and figure out, what is your yardstick? You know, what do you believe to be true? How do you recognize that you're even living in that way? One of the things that I noticed, my daughter and I last year went to Myrtle Beach. We're going to fly. And I decided that I was going to look into flying first class to Myrtle Beach. And one of the things for me that I realized is that, you know, first of all, I fly with work a lot. And so I always have frequent flyer miles and stuff like that. So I could have been flying first class before then, but I never even considered it was for me. I didn't even think about it. Like I would do Comfort Plus. I would buy a ticket. I never even considered. And Tennyson, he flies and he talked about, you know, getting upgraded to first class and all this. And so I was even hearing him talk about it, but it didn't even occur to me. And that was one of the ways that I was still swimming in that place of what's right, real, and true is white and male. This isn't even for you. You know, where are the other places in our lives? How do we discover? Who is it that helps us to see what we can't see? Mm-hmm. Connecting with our ancestors are really simple. You know, if you ask and speak to them and ask them to show up, they'll come. There was this particular night I was really struggling, and I was yelling at the ancestors, as I sometimes do. And just like, you all need to show the hell up. Like, if I'm gonna do this, I was, you know, in bed crying, all upset, like, you know. And then that next morning I had a call with a friend. She was in South Africa. We're online, and I just said, I'm so weepy today, and I don't even know why still, right? And so we get off the call. She's like, when you figure it out, let me know. And I get online, I'm on Facebook, and I get a message, and it's a message from a man that I don't know. He's Charles, and he sends me a message through my Nazuzu Facebook page. And he says, I don't know how often you check ancestry.com, but I sent you messages, and I think we're related. If you want to, it's through some family line. He says, if you want to know more, contact me and reach out. And so I said, yes, call me. So he called me that day. And he shared with me, he's been doing genealogy stuff since before it was on computers and all this. And he's like tracked all these family lines, and he has stories about our ancestors, our common ancestors, that 4 of them that fought in the Civil War, 3 that came back from a free state to come in and fight, and 2 of the ancestors that were part of the Underground Railroad. And he shared these stories with me about this common ancestry. And I just shared with him what a gift he was, because I told them to come the night before and he brought them to me. And so they show up in ways you can't imagine. My my mother, probably about 4 months after she died, I got a phone message from her. It was like a phone call. You know how they'll do the text when somebody calls and leaves a message, and you can listen to the voice. Well, I couldn't hear her voice. There was no voice to it, but the text was there. And she just said, I love you. You need to offer thanks. I love you. And, this is your mother, it started off with. And so they find ways to communicate, Mm. Mm. So as we get ready to close here, it's time together. What I want to do is I want to pass the piece again, and let's go around and just share a gift that you received. How about a gift and a commitment to yourself in relationship to the things that enslave you, the ancestors, anything that we've talked about today? So a gift and a commitment. He's in the center.
I'll take it. The gift I'm really grateful for is the connection to the ancestors. I hadn't expected that on a slavery call. This was completely new, and so much happened. A lot of breakthroughs happened. So thank you, Quanita, as always. And the commitment is to live into being rather than doing around teaching.
Thank you.
For it back.
Mm. Mm.
I'll pick up the stone. There are actually 2 gifts that I just now am realizing are related. One is something you said about our mothers are our heartbeat to the world. And a lot of what I talked about in the breakout sessions was my connection with my mother, and or lack thereof at times. And I'm my commitment around that is that I really want to focus on how she is my heartbeat to the world. And then something at the organizational level that you said at the very end, when you were consulting with this one group, you said at the organizational level, you'll struggle with what your mission is. And I'm doing a lot of work with my church, both at the local and larger levels. And yeah, that's just such a fruitful way to look at, okay, here's what we say our mission is. How are we struggling with it? And that just seems, because I think we tend to regard our mission as, you know, this is what we're about, this is what we do, but how do we struggle with that? And I guess the way they seem connected to me is I've always struggled with my relationship with my mother, but that's where the gifts are. And so looking at what we struggle with at an organizational level, where's the gift in that? And I'm gonna play with how those are all connected.
Thank you.
So I'll put the stone down now.
I can take this stone. So what I got from this is to see what is it that I am enslaved to. I had never thought of that actually before this. So that was, right from ideas, behavioral patterns, thought, how it extends into the physical, emotional. I mean, it can go at any level. And I'd not really thought of this. And what I'm going to work on and do it is exactly that. To see, maybe start with the smaller ones and see where that goes. What is it that I'm enslaved to? This was a new one for me. Thank you.
Okay.
I pass back the stone.
Okay, I'll take the talking stone. I mean, there's so many gifts, actually. I would say that the gift to bring into words the enslavement piece, which is just nested in how grateful I am to be in this space and for this time and space with everyone here. And then my commitment is to stand in the mess.
Thank you.
And I'll pick up the stone. Well, I have 12 pages of gifts. But and the one that is most all of a sudden like screaming in my head is what you've just said. Where do we fight for our own captivity? It's everywhere. And I have to really take a look at that. And then, sorry. And then the other piece of that, my commitment is, I now understand that this is actually from you, Quanita, and I thought it was Nalima, that the responsibility is with the one more healed. And I didn't know that. Nalima taught me that in many years ago in Shakti leadership, and I now understand that's from you and your elders. And so I'm thinking the whole process of how that came to me. And I am freeing myself from that. I am releasing myself from that slavery, and taking my own responsibility and letting the rest, leaving the rest. And that is a liberation that I can't even quite describe. It's been stirring for me for some time lately, and it's pretty amazing. So I'm very, very grateful and appreciative for all of you and this time. especially you, Q. Thanks.
Thank you. One of my gifts is I have a friend who does rites of passage work with people in recovery. And one of the things she says that I love is she says she always tells her people, I'm gifting this through you, not to you. And so one of the gifts for me is to be able to share what's been gifted through me, not just to me. And so each time I get to be in a circle with people and share some of my, my ancestors and my teachers, Jojo Palmaria and Fan Shan Shur, and the list kind of continues of people who have poured wisdom into me over the years, is such a gift, and I hope that I honor them well. So thank you for your yes today, and be well, enjoy your day, visit some of the other programs that are going on. I'm going to check it out. My website, just for those of you if you don't know, is nazuzu.com. So visit me there. And thank you. Thanks for getting up early, Rebecca.
Oh, it was worth every single sleepy moment. Absolutely. I am so grateful I chose it. So thank you.
Be well.
Thank you so much, Quanita. Thank
you.
You're welcome.
Such gifts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm.
You, Quanita.
Mm.